Practical Anarchy, A Guide to Self-Determination, Dickie Dredd. Section 25. The State and Division. If the state's monopoly on violence is its backbone, then division is its lifeblood. Rulers have always known that the easiest way to keep people in line is to set them against one another. Immigrants, benefit claimants, the poor, the homeless, drug addicts, travellers, these are the ready-made scapegoats wheeled out whenever the heat rises. Take immigration. The UK has been shaped by waves of newcomers for centuries. Each wave brought skills, culture and labour that enriched society. Yet for every generation, the state and its mouthpieces find a way to stir panic. The Irish were branded drunk and violent in the 19th century. Jews fleeing pogroms were painted as swindlers. West Indians in the 1950s were told to go home. Eastern Europeans in the 2000s were smeared as job stealers. The scapegoating shifts, but the script remains the same. Blame the outsider for the problems created by bosses, landlords and politicians. Case study. Immigration in the UK, continuity and contribution. Immigration to the UK is nothing new. It's the foundation of what the country is today. Romans, Saxons, Vikings, Normans. The UK itself was shaped by migration waves, each leaving their mark on language, culture and law. Huguenots, the 16th to the 17th century. Protestant refugees from France, many skilled in weaving, crafts and banking, invigorated local economies and trades. Irish immigration, 19th century. Hundreds of thousands moved to the UK, providing the labour for canals, factories and railways that powered the Industrial Revolution. Jewish communities, 19th to 20th century. Fleeing pogroms in Eastern Europe, Jewish migrants built thriving communities in London, Manchester and beyond, contributing to small business, science, politics and the arts. Caribbean migration, Windrush, post-1948. Invited to help rebuild post-war UK, the Windrush generation worked in transport, factories and above all in the new National Health Service, none of which could have functioned without the influx of workers. South Asian communities, 1960s to 1970s. Families from India, Pakistan and Bangladesh transformed food, textiles, healthcare and commerce, creating some of the UK's most vibrant cultural and economic hubs. Eastern European migration, 2000s. Workers from Poland, Romania and elsewhere filled vital roles in agriculture, care work, construction and hospitality, bringing with them a rich cultural diversity. Middle Eastern migration, 2010s to present. Refugees and migrants from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan and elsewhere have sought safety and opportunity in the UK. Despite hostility from the state and media, these communities have enriched the UK's cultural and social fabric, while often taking on essential work in care, hospitality and logistics. As the final bullet point is so topical at the time of writing, here are some statistics. Contemporary debates about immigration in the UK show just how effective the state scapegoating can be. A series of myths dominate headlines and political speeches, yet the data consistently tells a story, and in the book I give you the references for these. So these are all guaranteed references. First of all, illegal migrants now outnumber legal ones. A recent YouGov poll found that almost half of UK citizens believe irregular migrants outnumber legal entrants. In fact, legal migration exceeds irregular migration by at least 10 to 1. Among those who support mass deportations, 72% believe this falsehood. Small boat arrivals make up a large share of immigration. Coverage of English Channel crossings fuels the perception of an invasion. In reality, the small boat arrivals account for only 4% of the overall migration in the UK. Foreign nationals commit a disproportionate share of sexual crimes. A distorted claim suggested that 40% of sexual crimes in London were committed by foreign nationals. This was based on a flawed reading of police requests for court statistics, not convictions, and compared against mismatched population data. The figures exaggerate risk and inflame fear. The UK is overrun with refugees. The UK hosts only about 1% of the world's refugees, making up just 0.6% of the UK population. Per capita, the UK ranks 20th in Europe for asylum applications. Immigration is primarily illegal. Surveys show that 47% of people believe immigration to the UK is largely unlawful. The reality is the opposite. The vast majority of migrants enter lawfully through work, study, or family visas. Refugees and asylum seekers are dangerous. Media and politicians highlight isolated crimes by asylum seekers to stoke panic. Yet research shows no evidence of higher rates of sexual or violent crime among this group compared to the general population. The persistence of these myths shows how the state and its allies in the media create division. There is no immigration crisis, only mismanagement, scapegoating, and deliberate deflection from the real crises of housing, inequality, and austerity. And this is not just a UK story. Across the Atlantic, the same patterns repeat. In the US, migrants from Latin America are vilified as criminals, drug dealers, or illegals, despite the reality that most come to work in agriculture, construction, and care, industries that depend on their labour. Successive administrations, Republican and Democrat alike, have expanded border militarisation, built detention centres, and conducted mass deportations, while media and politicians stoke panic about caravans of migrants. Like in the UK, myths flourish. That migration is mostly unlawful, that migrants take jobs, that refugees bring crime. The data shows otherwise, yet the narrative persists because it serves the same purpose: to distract from structural inequality, to divide working people, and to legitimise the state's grip on power. Europe, too, has followed the script. In Italy, politicians rail against migrants crossing the Mediterranean while relying on the labour in agriculture and care. In Hungary, Viktor Orban has turned hostility to refugees into the cornerstone of his regime, framing outsiders as an existential threat to Christian Europe. In France, Marine Le Pen and others have built entire political movements around demonising immigrants, while at the same time the French economy and public services rely heavily on migrant workers. Across the continent, the far right exploits migration fears to climb the political ladder, and the state, whether centre-left or centre-right, often embraces their policies, tightening borders and expanding detention regimes in the name of security. What this shows is that scapegoating migration is not an accident or a quirk of one's nation's politics. It is a core function of modern states to divide populations, mask inequality, and legitimise coercion. The targets may change: Irish, Jews, Caribbean, Eastern European, Middle Eastern, but the logic remains the same. The histories of almost every modern country show that immigration is a constant, not a modern crisis. Each wave brought social, cultural and economic benefits, even as newcomers were scapegoated, marginalised and attacked. What the state frames as a threat has, time and again, been a lifeline. Welfare recipients play the same role in state division. Newspapers splash stories of scroungers and benefit cheats, living lives of luxury while the reality is grinding poverty, sanctions and queues at food banks. Instead of asking why billionaires dodge taxes or why rents keep rising, the public is encouraged to punch down, to see the single mum or the disabled claimant as the enemy. The state saves money, the rich keep their wealth, and resentment is neatly redirected. The poor themselves become a political weapon. Council estates are demonised, travellers criminalised, rough sleepers cleared from city centres, as if their presence was the problem, not the inequality that put them there. Whole communities are stigmatised, ensuring that those at the sharp end of austerity and exploitation are too busy surviving and too divided among themselves to mount a challenge to those in power. This is divide and rule, updated for the modern age. Empire thrived on pitting tribes against each other. Today's state thrives on pitting neighbour against neighbour. Politicians use language like hard-working families as a code to exclude, to suggest that anyone not fitting the image is undeserving. Benefits are recast as handouts, asylum seekers as invaders, strikers as enemies of the public. It works because it hides the real lines of power. Instead of seeing the chasm between billionaire and worker, People are encouraged to see the chasm between citizen and migrant, between worker and claimant, between deserving and undeserving poor. In truth, the divisions are manufactured, not natural, not inevitable, but cultivated by a state that knows its survival depends on them. For anarchists, exposing and resisting this division is essential. Mutual aid breaks the spell. When communities support each other across lines of nationality, class, and status, the state's trick weakens. History shows us again and again that when ordinary people stand together, the scapegoat game falters. The challenge is to make solidarity more visible than the scapegoating, to insist that the enemy is not the migrant, the claimant, or the poor, but the system that keeps us all precarious.